Urdu in the language policy. Now, before we attempt to answer the question we raised before regarding should the computer language be localized, we need to see what is the status of different languages within the hierarchy or structured by the language policy itself. So, Urdu in the language policy. Urdu has been defined as the national language. Apart from being given specific important functions in the governance, it acts as a lingua franca. It is a connecting language that enables us to communicate with different ethnic communities, and it is used in education, most widely used in education, formally in public schools and informally also in private schools. And it is there in the lower judiciary, in your law, it is there in all the lower functioning of the government, it is pretty much there. And some higher order functions are also ascribed to it. So it is a very important language in Pakistan. However, it is to be remembered that when Urdu was declared the national language, it faced a lot of resentment from certain sections, especially from the Bengali speakers. And the problem was that they just realized that they were being sort of marginalized with a national because of a language that they did not really know, in terms of a kind of their it somehow impeded their access to jobs, and not only their access to jobs, but also it was a symbol of the power of the center over the Bengali people. So the Bengalis felt a sense of marginalization, and very soon after Pakistan became independent, Urdu was questioned by certain factions about in terms of its in terms of it being declared the national language. The issue was not that these Ashrafia, that is the topmost Bengali people or the class, did not speak Urdu, or they did not speak English because those were the languages on the top. Yet they felt that in the lower cadre jobs, it was very difficult for them to enter jobs at the center where Urdu was given more importance, and they could not get an access in those echelons of power. Then, then the other part from where there was a problem in terms of accepting Urdu as the national language was Sindh, and that emerged from the migration of the Muhajirs into Pakistan. These Muhajirs were Urdu speaking elite. They were highly educated, and when they came to Sindh and they settled in, especially in the urban areas, it was easy for them to access the jobs over there because they knew the language, and somehow not only knew the language, but also with them they brought in this kind of prestige to the language. So because they were more educated, more cultured, so Urdu also came to be seen as or Urdu speakers came to be seen as those who held more prestige and a higher status. And interesting thing, for instance, to note over here, that these Muhajirs coming from India to Pakistan were under no compulsion to learn Sindhi because they did not really need it. While the Sindhis, who were the indigenous population of the place, had to now learn Urdu to access the jobs which might have been accessible to them earlier. So that became a problem. So what started to happen then was what is called by linguists voluntary language shift, that people began to voluntarily leave their local languages and make a shift towards Urdu. Because people usually, as Dr. Rahman points out, learn languages for pragmatic reasons, that is, for instrumental reasons. They want to use language as a tool to achieve other goals. And now, since these goals were educational, they were economic, they were also social, they were also cultural. So people began to leave their languages and make a shift towards the dominant language, which was Urdu. Now, although this kind of shift is called voluntary by the linguists, this is not voluntary in the real sense of the term. That is, although people make a choice, voluntary choice, to choose one language over the other, yet this choice is somehow compelled by the low status of their own languages. They have to make that choice because their own language becomes a sense of burden for them. It infests in them a sense of shame about their local identity, and now they want to be aligned with an imagined community, as Anderson says, which has a higher status. So interestingly, this resentment that was shown to Urdu or has been shown to Urdu has led to two paradoxical results according to Dr. Rahman. So one result is that because there is this resentment, people now look at your languages and they want to revitalize them. So there is a kind of resistance, and this resistance shows in the revitalization attempts of the communities. So people now want to write literature in their own languages, publish some material, try to make some textbooks available. So they're writing dictionaries because they want to sort of strengthen their own language as a sign of resistance to Urdu. The second thing, which is paradoxical to the first one, is that it somehow replaces, sadly, this need for additive bilingualism by a subtractive bilingualism. So more often than not, apart from the intelligentsia, the common people, instead of taking up a language in addition to their own local languages or learning Urdu in addition to other languages, they move towards a more assimilatory approach, and they try to shed off their own language and only use one language, that is Urdu. If you are thinking of examples, very important example in this regard can be Punjabi speakers who do not speak in Punjabi. Several of the Punjabi speakers do not speak in Punjabi to their children. So gradually in the younger generation, you might have lesser Punjabi speakers because the parents have made sure that they don't transfer this language to their children. This leads to language shift and also language death.